Okay, it's working. The bleep bleep blop was beep beep bopping all over the place. It was kind of wild for a second there. But we are here. We are here. We are here. We are here. Welcome, 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 welcome. Come on in. Come into this place. Come into the room with us. It's going to be an adventure. Yay. It's all happening. It's all happening. Ooh. Okay. Alexis is unable to join. Let's keep trying.
Yay!
There you are. Yes. I was like, oh, I believe she will be able to get in here. Yes. Hi, beautiful.
Hello, love.
How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to see your face and
it's so good to see your face.
Your books in place.
Look, I'm very pleased. My Octavia collection is all it's all happening. My Undrowned and Holding Change are all upon each other.
Aww.
I wore my Black Feminist Funk shirt today because I was like, this is definitely the Black Feminist Funk. Like that's what today is. And I feel really excited to talk with you. I'm just like making sure I have my questions together. We've been having a blast these past few days doing these conversations. And I'm really like, I'm always honored that, this thing just popped up and said you're unable to join, but you're here right now. Are you here right now? Foiled. All right, let's see. Is everyone else here right now? Am I here right now? Okay. Let's see. I'm going to see if I can get Alexis back. I'm going to be patient. That's what's going to happen. All right. We're here. We are here. We are here. We are here. Okay, I got my nails done. So we're here. All right, babe.
I don't know what happened. Suddenly you froze and I was like.
That's what happened on my end too, as I was like, but Alexis's face be moving more than that. So now I can hear you. I hear you, but you're still not moving.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Flip your camera so it goes like, you know, when it looks away from you and then it comes back.
Okay. That's my computer. Now it's me. Did that help?
It didn't help me, but maybe other people can see you. I'm like,
Yeah, I'm like, is my face moving for other folks?
All right. Both videos are working for everyone else. So I'm just gonna like see how that feels. I'm gonna trust it. I'm just gonna trust it. Because I believe.
I too believe.
So with your contribution to this book, so just so folks know, if you're tuning in, the conversation that we're having is around holding change, the way of emergent strategy, facilitation, and mediation. And the middle of the book is basically all Black feminist wisdom. And the first piece of Black feminist wisdom is called Stay Black and Breathe by Alexis Pauline Gumbs. And Alexis, I wonder if you would actually kick us off by reading like this first, like, I really love this whole essay, but read like the first, I'm like,
just read the whole thing.
Hello. Maybe read through just that first piece before you start moving into like the things you've learned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. But like, oh, my mom's here. Hi, Mom.
Oh. Okay.
So sweet. She's like, it's working. You're moving. Okay, that's that.
Oh, thanks, Mom.
If Mama can see, then
I was like, if everyone else can see you, then it's just going to be such a magical experience for me. I'll go back later and see what faces I'm making throughout this environment, this experience.
I'd be making faces. So this is Stay Black and Breathe. Facilitation is a Black art. Why? Because every facilitation process is a journey into the unknown, a possible future, a bright Black field of possibility. That's why we need facilitators as guides, because it is not easy to face the depth of how things have been and to open up to the vulnerability of how things could be. But we must. Every facilitator is a doula, easing some necessary rebirth, organizational, political, interpersonal, or otherwise, for some folks who want change. The future is Black because we don't know it yet, and that's the beautiful thing. But if you haven't noticed, folks are scared to death of Black beauty. Even Black folks are socialized to fear the Blackness of the universe, the future, ourselves. A Black sky of infinite stars is terrifying to any of us living, organizing, and relating to each other in a white supremacist colonized frame that has trained us to pretend we already know. To pretend that what matters to us most is under our control. It isn't. Are you breathing? Consider the top 2 things people say they are afraid of. 1, speaking in public. 2, death. Every facilitation practice confronts both. And when people are afraid, they do not breathe. I assert that your primary responsibility as a facilitator is to keep people breathing in the face of their greatest fears, including rejection, not knowing, being wrong, losing something, and the future. And if you do it for the sake of what the people you collaborate with want most, change, possibility, connection, revelation, clarity, purpose, futures, this is why we do it. Okay, and then there's the rest of the essay that gets more specific about breathing. But that's
and it gets so specific. So it's so good, Alexis. Like, I just felt like there's sometimes when you start to read the essay and it's just like, boom, like that's a paragraph's worth, basically, that everyone who's facilitating and everyone who's alive right now and everyone who's trying to do movement right now needs to read. It feels like it pulls together so many of the different threads that we're needing to learn in this moment. And I think that that's one of the things I always love about your writing and how you approach your writing is you're not scared of naming all the complexity that is happening concurrently at the same time. And then the things you say, the lessons are: breathing has a Black feminist history. You breathe first. Facilitation is breathing in public. Breathing is a shared resource. The air we breathe is dedicated air. Breathing is particular and breathing is sacred. And your practice 7 years ago with, I guess probably 8 years ago now, since it's come out. But the practice where you were naming Black feminists that we were learning, that we were like, had learned from, we were in lineage of, changed my facilitation practice. Because I think at that point, I wasn't really breathing as a facilitator. And I was doing a lot of other things, magically pulling stuff off without breath. And I realized I need to be breathing and the room needed to be breathing if we wanted a different outcome. So I'm going to ask you a set of questions. Actually, hold on a second. Can you go off and come back on? I feel like I just can't. I have to see you.
Yeah.
It's
what do I
driving
do?
me nuts.
Press the camp. Okay, wait. Now it's off. Can you see me now?
No. I think you have to go like all the way back out and let me invite you back
I'll
in.
press the X. Okay, I'll be right back.
You just have to understand, y'all. It's too weird. Her face is like frozen. It's going to be fine. Okay, there she is. Ah,
Yay!
That's what I needed. I'm sorry. I was just sort of like, I can't, like, it's already too much to be like, you have to see, like, I'm like, it's already too much to try to have a conversation where you're looking at your own face. But then, like, looking at someone's frozen face while your face moves, I was just like, no, I can't, I cannot. And everyone has limits, and I'm trying to honor mine.
That's right. Honor it.
let's jump into this. So I want to go back because people who are just entering this conversation and have not maybe been studying Alexis and I's entire personal life, their whole lives, might not know that we went to the same college and we had this overlap very early in both of our lives, both of our paths. And so when I first met you, I was like, oh, you are the most brilliant, amazing writer, publisher person. And somehow you already figured that out. I'm late to life and Alexis is already there. And I love that feeling. Like, I love that feeling continuously where I'm just like, where's Alexis? Like, you're always on the horizon for me. You're always like, I'm out here doing this. So I want to ask you, when did you say to yourself or feel to yourself like, oh, I'm a facilitator, like amongst the other things that I'm up to, I'm facilitating?
Oh, I love that question. And just so you know, when I met you, I was like, oh, we will win. And this is how I know. Great.
Good.
Like, embodied proof that we can get this together. So
we gonna win when we have horizons. We're good.
We're good. That's what's on the horizon.
That's what's happening.
Yeah. So facilitation, I mean, yeah, I don't think anyone would be surprised. I came to it through writing. And so when I was I've been writing as a small child. I had things I needed to write down and that I wanted to, that I felt there was a power in that. And I maybe remembered that, but I certainly knew that from a young age. But as a teenager, I was part of this organization called Youth Communication that published a citywide youth-run newspaper for the teens of Metro Atlanta.
Awesome.
And so, like everything, and you know, my mom is here. Like, my parents were very much like, "Oh, it's a writing thing. Great, go. We know that you want to be in all the writing."
That's about you,
right?
Mm-hmm.
But the miracle is that really, Kavi Rajana was working there at the time, and she was like, "There's going to be a community action component to what these, you know, young journalist teenagers are doing together, to be accountable to the fact that you're not really having a newspaper that's by and for the teenagers of Metro Atlanta without some organizing work, right?"
That's good.
Bobby was like, okay, so we got to have writing workshops in the youth detention centers. Those are teenagers in Metro Atlanta. We got to have writing workshops in the processing centers for people who are seeking refuge and who are new immigrants to the city. You know, like, she was like, she's a visionary, and I love her. And so, yeah, she was just like, go. My very first time facilitating, it was me and E.R. Anderson, who you also know, who now does amazing programming at Karis Books, like the event we had last
Exactly.
We facilitated a writing workshop in the Lorenzo Youth Detention Center. And we just had to think about, like, what does it mean to make this thing that's not supposed to happen here? You know, like, empowered self-expression by these young people who all day, everyone's telling them in a more extreme way, even than in all schools, be quiet, don't express yourself, shut it down, you're wrong, right? That was the message violently being imposed every day on these young people our same age, right? That was my very first facilitation experience. And so it came through writing, and it was to facilitate other people being able to write together, or writing as a way for them to be able to, you know, speak their truths that were being suppressed, but that were really necessary for everyone in the world to hear. But at the time, we were really thinking about it with a youth consciousness, you know, like, as young people in different institutional situations, we need each other, and we need that reflection.
I love that.
And that was one of the most amazing experiences of love. I was like, this is an experience of love. This is a way to love and be loved, because there's something that happens in that space.
Yeah.
When we hold the space in a way that really allows people to be present beyond what they've been taught.
Yes.
How present they can be, how themselves they can be. That's it. So I never stopped. Like, I don't know.
That's right. You haven't stopped. And I think for many of us, there's like those first experiences where we come in and it's like, okay, we're facilitating, we're holding space, are we in charge of the room? Like, what's going on? And, there's that process of being like, okay, I'm actually learning a craft. Like at a certain point, it's like, oh, this is also, I think of facilitation as a way of life. I think of it as a spiritual practice. I think of it as doula work. I think all those things. And it's a craft. Like it's a thing where like you practice, and as you practice, you learn your own particular things. So I'd love to hear like about how did you learn to facilitate, and when do you feel like you start to really be like, this is the Alexis way? Like I'm really putting my own funk on it now. Like,
Oh yeah, I love that. I love the incorporation of the word funk also.
I'm going to keep bringing it in as much as I can. So,
yes. Yeah, it's totally a craft. And, I love, thinking about ER, who we were there the first time, and like, we still, we're still.
I love that y'all still collaborate in different ways too. Like,
yeah. And honestly, I think that he could answer better than me what is the Alexis facilitation, because there have been many times, like, we've been in different spaces, or he's come to something where I've been holding space, and obviously vice versa all the time. And we'll be like, it's almost like he can see behind. He can,
he's seen your growth all along.
Yeah.
I love that.
But yeah, I think it's practice and practice. And one of the things that I'm really grateful for is that because the context we came into facilitation with was like, we're young people, we are coming with this ethic that we're not experts. We just belong to each other because we're all young people, and there's things dividing us, and we're more powerful than that. And because there was really a critique that we had of all of the authority figures who were adults in our lives, right? And so we definitely weren't trying to reproduce that. Like, I'm the teacher, I know, like, that was the opposite of the whole reason that we were doing it.
Yes.
So it had an inherently popular education, we're all learning together ethos to it, which I'm grateful for, because for me, that's all I've ever known.
Yeah.
And that's really what I believe allows the love to flow best. I think that, there are milestones. I definitely know early on this thing about you breathe first was important, because I'm not less afraid of public speaking than other people. I've done it more than some people.
That's right.
It's not because I'm less afraid. It's that I can still breathe, and I think that when I realized that, and actually a mentor said, I think they were actually saying this because I was like panicking about the SATs or something. And they were, but if you breathe, if you take a deep breath, it sends oxygen to your brain and it just helps. And I was like, yeah, whatever. People say take a deep breath. It's a cliche. But then I just did it every time. And I was like, oh, my brain works much better right after I take a deep breath than it does while I'm shallow breathing and experiencing.
It really is a miraculous design.
It's just
like if you don't pay attention to it, it works. And if you do pay attention to it, it works even more.
Exactly.
That's great.
We can use it. So it didn't take much, to know that, okay, I feel that working for me. I have a witness and a testimony that there's just something else that's possible. I can be more open. I can be more present if I consciously take that deep breath. So that's why at the beginning, whatever it is that I'm facilitating, I'm like, let's breathe together, because I am excited to be with the part of you that has that openness and feels that possibility of presence and like whatever that oxygen is allowing to happen in your brain, like that's the whole reason I'm here. Like I'm here for it. and
I love it. And could you share with us maybe it, I feel like you're a tuning fork of like Black feminist wisdom too, like what's needed in the moment. In this moment, like can we breathe together around a piece of Black feminist wisdom? Like, is there something that feels just right for right now?
Yeah, actually, the Black feminist breathing mantra that's with me in this moment is from Essex Hemphill, the great gay Black feminist poet.
Yes.
And the mantra is, I love myself enough to be who I am.
Yes.
So if we could just have 3 breaths, what I'm doing is I'm putting my feet on the floor, putting my shoulders back. That's just what it is for me to allow more breath. Yes. Wherever y'all are, there could be something that allows your breath to flow easier. And I'm going to mark my inhale and exhale, and y'all can breathe at your own pace or along with me. Inhaling and exhaling. Inhaling and exhaling. Inhaling and exhaling. And then let's just say this in a few times in unison. I'll stop at some point and then you could stop, or you could just whisper this quietly to yourself for the rest of your life, because that is how wonderful that insight is from Essex Hemphill. I love myself enough to be who I am. I love myself enough to be who I am. I love myself enough to be who I am. I love myself enough to be who I am. I love myself enough to be who I am. I love myself enough to be who I am. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ancestor Essex.
Yes, that's a good one. I love it. The way it feels to me, you know, is we're each having this distinct human experience. And there's this ocean of experiences. And when one of us has an awakening, it's like that wave of awakening moves out from us into that ocean that can touch others. And when we uplift an ancestral aha, right? It's like, oh, Essex like didn't know that and then realized it. Yes. And then said it and wrote it. And that wave continues into us. So it's like the bell, the wave, the movement of a life goes so far beyond what we can imagine, which I think that's the energy I always want to bring into facilitation, right? Is I'm just like, we don't know how the ripples of what we're doing in this space, in this moment, in this time will move out. We know they will move out, right?
Yeah.
They will go beyond us. And I feel like there's a value of sacredness that you bring to the spaces that you hold. I'd love to hear from you now, today, when you facilitate. What would you say are the values that you're bringing into your facilitation, and have they changed over the course of your years and years doing this?
Yeah, I think that the sacredness is there for sure. Yes. And really, if I don't think there's a divine potential possibility, I'm not there, you know. Like that's a baseline.
I'll let the wave go by.
I mean, but the wonderful thing is that obviously there's divinity everywhere, and like
exactly.
The actual fact that there are people breathing and the potential of that is sacred, you know. Yes. So as long as we can be honest about that, you know, I'm in there. I would say something that has come into the practice over time is dedication. Mm-hmm. And so dedication comes from this value that wherever we are, whatever we're doing, it's connected to love and specific relationships that we have that make it possible for us to be who we are, to love ourselves enough to be here. And so naming that has become a practice. Mm-hmm. I'm realizing in this moment, that really happened because of a shift in values. I absolutely believe that there's infinite possibility in any room of people. And, you know, we have the whole world in here, and like, and we are enough, right? Like the mantra is saying.
Yeah.
And there's something that happened where, and I want to say it was around the time when I first started facilitating, actually in collaboration with folks, other abolitionists in critical resistance,
Great.
where I realized that group agreements are important and great and wonderful.
Yeah.
But in terms of the actual impact on who people show up as and how they relate to each other in the space,
yes,
dedicating their participation to someone outside of the space who they love enough to intentionally bring into the space is what, whether that happened or didn't happen, was actually the measure of whether people could be present and honorable with each other in the space.
Wow.
Or they couldn't. It's like, it seems it's as important as that deep breath.
Yes.
Was the capacity for presence that just saying my grandmother, Lydia Gumbs, and just saying out loud, this is who I'm being in this space.
Yes. I'm
that granddaughter that Lydia Gumbs loved before I said anything smart or could talk at all. Just for existing. You know, like
you're perfect. You look at your little cute butt.
Right.
Like, yes.
And that's who I am, right? So I'm not in the scarcity of like, well, I got to be smart enough to be in here. I have to earn my right to breathe in this space.
Right.
And that's the thing, that it's not because people are ignorant. It's just because capitalism says you have to earn your breath.
Everything.
That is to me, the fundamental violence of capitalism is it says you have to earn your breath, and our breath is divine and enough. So that value of intentionally in the space, I know that it's not just you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
All of who's in this space, yes, you and exactly who you showed up as.
That's right.
And I know this is what Vivette Jeffries Logan says, you know, I see all your generations behind you.
That's
I see the generations in front of you. And for me, it's less visual and more like I hear them, you know, like they're here. And when we call them in, there's an intention and power that is possible. And so if I'm holding the space, I don't skip it. Yeah. I do not skip it, because it's always worth it. And for me, if it's the only thing that happens, it's worth it. Instagram, let us do this. Just like we have to breathe first.
Yeah.
I have to dedicate. I mean, you know, before I'm here, it's like, oh, who's with me? Oh, okay, it is my grandmother who's with me. I don't know what my phone is trying to do, but I'm gonna have to grab a charge.
It's a magical time. Like, I will get frustrated, and then I'll be like, well, also, this is still unique in history that we can just be like in a city, in the world, talking to each other in a way that other people can witness, and like hijinks will ensue, but it's still pretty amazing. So I really, really appreciate that. I feel like I've been in the spaces where that dedication has happened, and I've been in spaces where I would remember you and use dedication as an intervention when I was like, oh, hold on. We're all in this space acting like it's just each of us and our feelings, and that's it. And that we're only accountable to our reactivity, really, in this moment. Like, whatever reaction is happening in us, we want everyone in this room to account for. And I'm like, that's not ever what's actually happening. We are weaving, you know, I think that seeing the hearing, for me, it's a feeling, right? That I'm like, I can feel the dynamic of the room shift when people are like, oh, wait, I am multitudes. I am representative. I am a spiritual representative. I am, you know, all these things are happening. And all of that does happen in the body, right? So much facilitation is this act of like collectively choosing to embody something. You know, I think of myself when I'm facilitating as I'm like, I am part of a container. Like I am part of creating a spiritual container, sometimes a physical container, sometimes a emotional container. Like, and it's been hard. And I want to ask you this maybe at some point, but the visibility, increasing visibility has actually made it harder and harder to be a part of that container because people are like, I have so many expectations. I'm like, expectations and container don't necessarily work together, right? But the body piece of it feels so important. And I think breath is this invitation into the body, the right now, this place.
Yeah.
And it amazes me how much we try to facilitate without the body.
Yeah.
Like we try to just be like a group of brains in a room strategizing over what. So I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are. Like, why do people leave the body out? And what have you seen become possible when the body is invited in, when the integrated self is invited in?
Yeah. I mean, it's so amazing because it takes me back to that first time facilitating, you know,
Yes.
and it was a prison, a youth prison space. And the amount of harm that people had experienced and the amount of not wanting to be where they were, which was caged, that people were experiencing in that space was so palpable, you know. And I wish we could have chanted Essex Hemphill then, you know, like I didn't know that Essex Hemphill said that at that time, and I didn't.
I'm like, let's send our practice today back in that direction.
Absolutely.
Like, yes,
absolutely, because that's why we take it out of the body, because we feel unsafe, because our bodies have been harmed.
Yes.
Even if we haven't survived the particular experience of being a young person in prison, I know that I've been experiencing capitalism and racism and homophobia and sexism, and I feel it. And I feel it in my body, and I don't want to feel that, right? So I have created ways to disassociate from what my body's experiencing, because I know a lot of what my body's experiencing in this context is not right. I don't consent to it. That's the reality. And I'm grateful for that capacity, honestly, to
I'm so grateful for it. Especially this past year, I was like, thank God I can dissociate right now.
I mean, we have to,
so
right?
great.
And I think about Leah, you know, Leah Lakshmi calls it going up, right? The capacity to go up, and sometimes we need that in order to move through a situation that is harmful to us physically. And sometimes we're in a space where we're not actually, no one's actually attacking us.
Right.
We still sometimes are triggered in remembering a time when, you know, like, so all of that is present in the space. That's why we do it, you know, and I have personal experience of it, and I have a lot of compassion for that. And what I'm excited about in terms of facilitation, and facilitation, honestly, I don't know if it's a word that holds it. Like, this is not what makes it easier. It's like what makes it possible. You know, like possibilification is I think what happens. It's possible for us to have a different embodied memory of what it feels like to be alive, of what it feels like to be in community, to be spoken to be listened to really experience that differently throughout my entire body. That's important, because that's how I can then return to that, you know, in a different moment, where I've had that moment where I'm like not in a safe space, and I'm looking a police officer in their face, and I'm like, but I can return to a moment where I was actually in a critical resistance role play with someone who I love and who honored me. And I can bring, that's the time travel, right? Like I can bring that to this moment. So we get to create those new embodied memories if we can be embodied together. And that's why it's such sacred work and doula work to facilitate and possibilificate, because that period, like that happens, and everybody's in the space embodied together and feels safe enough to just be here together. That's a victory.
That is. And I really love, you know, you have bent my mind and my concept of time so many different ways. And time is one of the battlegrounds when we're facilitating, right? There is the Western white concept of constant urgency and scarcity, time. And then there's all these other ways of understanding time as something that is always now, concurrent, cyclical, can be traversed along, and that our memories are a way that we time travel, and our imaginations are a way that we time travel, and like how we're sending energy. And it makes me, I'm just like, in a new way, I feel like I've been hitting on the importance of the now as like, I've been a futurist my whole adult life. I've just been like, I am out there. Come on, guys. Like my JV, I'm like, but I'm just like, come on, let's go. And I'm realizing the breath, the importance of the breath and the importance of the body is like right now, today, that future is possible.
Yeah.
If we choose it in this space, in this room, right now, today, it is possible. And I love that idea of imprinting, right? Because what we know about our brains is our brains don't actually make that distinction between things we visualize and things we physically experience.
Right.
Our brains can remember it all at the same imprint level. So I'm like, we are imprinting whatever future we want into current practice and into current body practice. I'd love for you to share, if you will, a story or an example, because recently you've been facilitating church. Basically, like you've been like holding a whole ass church. And you also do oracle journeys with people. You also do straight up like facilitation of organizations in a room. I'd love to hear a recent example where the room was moving in one direction and breath and embodiment helped bring the room into the direction that they wanted and needed to be heading into.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's subtle, I think that it's subtle, and so much, I guess I just want to talk about the subtlety because so much of it is accountable for being present. Like there's an activity that I do sometimes inspired by the harbor seal who like slows down their heart.
Yes.
To like 100th of the speed that its heart was beating at, so it can dive and so it can breathe long enough to stay underwater and do miraculous things that harbor seals do underwater. And the activity was just to like pay attention to our own pulse and like count 60 pulses, and then we raise our hand when once we get to 60, and everybody raises their hand at a different time because our pulse is doing what it's doing.
That's right.
But if I'm in front of a room facilitating people to do that, I always end up raising my hand first. And it's interesting because, people are like, Alexis is speaking so slowly and soothingly. And nobody but me knows that my heart is beating fast because I'm still, like that's what happens every time. Yeah. It's still like, oh, wow. It increases my heart rate. And it's not like that's a problem. It's just like, I just, I love it so much. It's like I anticipate, all kinds of things.
Yes.
But I always have the fastest heart rate in the room, like whenever we do this activity. Anyway, and I say that to say that people feel what's going on. People feel what's going on, whether they're the facilitator or not. Whether they're intentionally attuned to it or they just are responding to it on a very subtle internal level.
That's right.
People can feel it. So sometimes, and I write about this doula experience with my sister Kyla in here. Sometimes it hasn't been like, all right, everyone, we're going to take a deep breath, and then people come back into themselves. Sometimes it's just I personally.
Yes.
Take a deep breath. And one of my superpowers is I'm a loud breather, as you all heard earlier. So like, my breathing like projects, you know what I'm saying? And that's, in the time of COVID, that's why we got the online facilitation. But people can still hear me.
I need to keep y'all safe from this powerful breath right now. So.
I am the niece of an opera diva. You know what I'm saying? So like we have a powerful breathing. But it's
great.
It's I have felt that happen. I've felt myself let go of like exactly that moment, like, oh, we're supposed to be doing this, and this is happening instead, and now I'm constricting my breathing because everyone's gonna blame me because like blah,
exactly
blah, blah, right? And when I have to take a deep breath and release that, and the other people breathe.
Yes.
And it's like, it's okay.
Yes.
You know, it's okay. And I think that's the thing about breathing that's so powerful, because it does send a message to our entire being. Because sometimes we're in a space and it's like we're acting like we feel like we're about to die.
Yes.
We're not. It's just somebody misinterpreted.
No, I mean, it's
what
one
I
of my
said.
very favorite things about facilitation that I'm always like, everyone's like, you're so calm. And I'm like, no, it's just, we're not in an emergency room.
We're not.
We're literally not. And I have been. And I have friends, you know, I've lost people to actual urgent conditions. And this isn't one of them. We are just having a conversation and your feelings are hurt. And that's deal withable. Like, we can breathe our way through this. And also having been in actual births, you know, I'm just sort of like, I talk about this often, that I'm like, the moment of the most tension is the moment right before the miracle is present in our lives, right? That's like the good moment. So I'm like, if we're in a ring of fire in this room right now, then good.
Let's go.
Let's push. You know, let's go for it. And I love this, the juxtaposition too, because tomorrow I have Makani on, and Makani is like, we are not midwives. And I'm like, I know. But also we are doulas, but you know, and I'm like, at some point we're going to get to talk about it all, but I think that breathing becomes a ritual you can call on at any time, like an internal ceremony. You know, I think of facilitation as like, there's so much internal ceremony for me that happens, where I'm like, okay, right now I need to extend energy under the room or do something. And I would love to ask you, like, what are other facilitation rituals you might have, facilitation ceremony you have, particularly, so, you know, breath coming in, dedication coming in, we've heard, breath sometimes as an intervention. Do you have rituals for like when the shit does hit the fan, there's poop on everything and the day is done and, you know, you're like, I don't want to go to bed with this poop on me, you know? Spiritual poop, emotional poop, other people's stuff, whatever it is. What are facilitation rituals that you draw on? What are internal ceremonies that you practice?
Yeah, a good reset. You know, sometimes it's so important to reset. One of the things we were actually doing in the Undrowned Writing Workshop last week or this week, I don't know. Recently, time moves.
Yeah.
I don't know how. But I'm here. We practiced like breathing through our crown chakra as a releasing, and a lot of folks found that like sound with that, like the vibration of sound with that, was super helpful. And I was like, well, that makes so much sense, because to reset, I sing and dance. You know, like it's all
That's
vibrational. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Turning on a song and dancing until I sweat is a releasing, cleansing, for sure. Talking to someone in a different generation from me is a real powerful reset. Sometimes just taking a nap is the exact reset, or taking a shower. You know, really simple things are like, that works. You know,
I love that.
That is super simple. And I like to say the simple things because, you know, sometimes we're not in a place where it can be like, you know, I have hours to enter a beautiful chamber of, you know, and there's singing bowls, and you know, I love it when I do get.
It's so nice when the temple is available. However,
but sometimes it's definitely gonna be, you know, this, you know, just trying to sing along. Legacy, re-intone songs, neither of whom I can sing like, but just trying to sing like the most powerful women who ever sang, just trying it. The effort of
that's that. Right. Letting yourself be a channel, you know, for it.
Mm-hmm. It's all there. There are really infinite ways, and the fun thing is to just try them, and then when one works, just keep with it. Keep with it.
Yeah, I feel like that. Like so much happens that you're learning in front of the room. You know, you're just like, oh, I could do this now. Or, you know, after, like, I think my practice is often to be doing something and then notice that I'm doing it. You know, I'm like, oh, after a hard facilitation, like I take a bath and it's like I literally invite it all to come out and go down the drain. You know, I'm just sort of like, what's not mine is not mine. I don't want to carry that. And let me carry what is mine. You know, like I feel like the accountability is in that dance of being like, I can handle what's mine. And so I have a couple more questions about the writing process. And then I wanted to invite people, if you put questions in the little bubble that has a queue, then I can see them. I can't track really the chat. It just moves in such an interesting way. But if you have an actual question, you put it in the actual queue box. If there's time, I'll get to it. So I would love to hear, I've had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I feel like you're in 4 of the book. Like you're in like, I feel like I don't do a book where I'm like, how can I make Alexis be? Like I just am always like, how? And each time what comes back from you is so different from what I could have imagined. Like I'm like, I just feel a longing for the Alexis infusion. And I don't know, you know, I give different instructions, you know, I think for Octavia's Brood, it was like 10 pages. And you were like, here's the most genius story about post-capitalism. And then, you know, so each thing is like a different, amazing offer. And for this one, it was really just like a brief offer on breath. And what you came back with was like, facilitation's a black art. I was like, hold the phone. Like, you know, this is so thrilling, right? So I wanted to ask you, like, kind of your writing process. Like when you get a request in, it feels like it goes through some magical transformational channel for what's necessary in this moment. And I want to understand what you know about that channel or what you're willing to share about that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I mean, first of all, just your invitations are so on time and luscious and generative. And I charge this phone. Excuse me as we walk through my house. But
these people,
because my phone is like, speaking of breathing, what about me?
I also need some energy.
You know what I'm saying? So, but what I'm saying to you is that, oh yeah, so it takes me back to the person who actually created youth communication that ER and I participated in, or at least the version of it that we had in Atlanta. Her name is Rachel Alterman Wallach.
Wow.
And she had this amazing comic on the wall, and I don't even know who drew it, but it said, writing is easy. All you have to do is sit down and open up a vein, right? And so it's like,
yes,
for me, I never forgot that, because it was like, yeah, writing is so easy and not easy at all. You know, like you have to tap in, right? Yeah. And that's true. Yeah. I think that, you know, this is what Gloria Anzaldúa says is so scary. She's like, I'm so scared of my pen. I don't know what's going to happen, you know? Yeah. And there's a humility there because there's a difference. And this is what when you invite me to do something, I know that it's like, it's not like, well, if it doesn't fit in these, you know, like it's not, you're not scarce with your invitations. You're so abundant. And that's why it leads to these amazing offerings like this book that I totally want to hang out with everybody who contributed to this book as soon as I can.
They're really amazing humans. I'm like,
but yeah, I was just like, tap in, you know, and listen and understand that it's not Adrienne saying like, Alexis ego, small Alexis, answer this prompt or like put something here. You're asking the infinite to just come through me this time to shape something. And so I have to sit there and be like, okay, what is it? And that's what comes. Facilitation is a black art, right? And it's why black, that, you know, like that is like, you didn't say to talk about the blackness of facilitation.
No, but it was so necessary, you know, like it was so necessary for this book. Like, I feel like sometimes I'll be on the precipice of something and then you're like, jump, you know, like what you're, there's a reason why for me, Holding Change had to be a book that was full of Black feminist wisdom. In the heart of it is, it was like if you look back at all these movements, Black and brown women are facilitating them. Like if you look at this moment in history of Me Too and Black Lives Matter and everything, it's like there's these Black women behind the scenes. There's these Black women that folks are calling because they're in a crisis. There's these Black women that are like, facilitating individual people to become a leader that can stand in the onslaught of attention or whatever it is. And I was like, how do we shine a light on these Black feminists who are behind the scenes doing this? And then for you to be like, it's a Black art. It's like, and because it is a vast art.
Exactly.
Because we are a vast people, because we are an invitation to vastness. We are the rejection of the narrowness of whiteness.
Yes.
And everyone is welcome. That's the other thing that's so Octavia Butler and Butlerian about it all, is that it's like all humans can figure their way out to their vastness, but no one can get free through a narrowness, right? Through a constant narrowing constriction, right? It's just so brilliant, Alexis. Like, I'm just like, you're so brilliant. Final question from me, and then there's like 50 billion in the thing. What do you want people, how do you want people to use your essay when they're moving into facilitation and mediation? Like in your dream world of people being like, I am using this.
I mean, if folks can just remember that breathing is powerful, and it's something that they can relate to powerfully. Part of what I write about in there is like, it's not to say that breathing is always easy and accessible. That is variable. Our breathing is variable because we're embodied specifically, but it's possible while we're alive, and we can relate to it powerfully. That's enough, and I think that my dream would be, for sure, in spaces where somebody is playing a role of facilitator.
Yeah.
But breathing is what makes it possible to live. Like breathing is the facilitator of the whole body, basically.
That's right.
Like without the air moving to all of these parts of our body, nothing else happens. And so I think that people who are doing that work of holding the space of facilitation value their own breathing, understand that this is what is at stake.
Yeah.
This
is what's at stake.
And it's so clear, this is why, of course, we're in this pandemic where what our breathing is, we can't ignore it. But also the reasons that white supremacists strangle people publicly since the age of lynching up to this very moment, it's because our breathing is so powerful. It's so, so powerful. And we don't have to be the last ones to know it.
That's right.
So I hope that people can use it in that way, even just to take that breath, where maybe they're not facilitating, maybe they're just having a conversation that is hard to have, that they're scared to have with somebody in their own family, or interpersonally, or in a crisis and emergency situation.
That's right.
Like being able to access that. I hope that's the impact that it has, and that there's so many opportunities to practice that people can be experts on their own breath a lot easier than they can be experts on anything that you got to go to the library to learn about or look up online. Like you have it with you. You can notice at any time. So that's my hope.
I love that. I feel like it gives people, I feel like sometimes facilitators or people who are like, I want to learn to facilitate, think they have to learn to like know everything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a way. That's a way towards something. That might be a way towards punditry, but it's a way towards something. But for facilitation, I'm like, you don't, in some ways for facilitation, for me, it's a way of being like, I don't know. I think that all of you have parts of this.
Yeah. And
if we're breathing in chorus together, we can know something really big. So there's some great questions in here, a ton of them. The first one, I'm going to go straight to our friend Savannah Shangay, who is whenever she's here is good. So for those of us who are teachers is there a way you hold classroom space differently from one-off or movement facilitation? In parentheses, the ongoing relationship, some kind of preordained learning task, etc.
Yeah. I love that. I think there's something, I mean, and what's complicated about it is I love working with the same group of people for a period of time where we get to grow together. I love that so much. I don't necessarily like interfacing with what the institution thinks that means, you know, like
that part.
So that part of it, I mean, and this is, you know, Savannah is, if other folks are interested in this too, Savannah is one of the most important thinkers around this, around educational justice, and like what institutionally happens to education. And then also just an incredible educator whose students like literally kiss the ground and thank the Lord that you came into their lives. So
no, I'm trying to find Progressive Dystopia.
Yes, everybody read Progressive Dystopia. And
it's here.
So I would say for me, it is a question of scale. Because whereas I, as a facilitator, and I take this, to me, I'm not a different person when I'm teaching. I'm just facilitating a class in that case. What does it take for me to be present with this group of people today, all weekend? It's a different question than what does it take for me to be present with this group of people for 3 months or, you know, for a whole year, or what that looks like. So just like doing something for one day, I have to think about, you know, there's a certain tea that I'm going to want to have with me. There's certain, like, I'm going to want to know that my grandmother knows I'm calling her after this, you know, like whatever those things that I set up over the long term. Who are those support people? What are those embodied practices that are helping me to be present in a way that allows me to facilitate this space? And then, because then the next question, whether it's a one-off or whether it's a long-term, is what makes it possible for the other people to be present in this space? When it comes to something that's long-term, there's a lot of factors, right? People are moving into this space again and again and again out of their own lives that I have no control over. I can't go and make everybody in their family take a deep breath, you know, like that I would, you know.
That would be great.
But that would be overreaching, right? But I can say, okay, here are some available practices. Here are some things that every time we come in here, you can depend on the fact that this is going to happen.
That's right.
We're going to take this space of breathing to release whatever we need to release to be here. We're going to do this act of dedication to remember that we're not fragile in here. We're the result of lifetimes of love. You know, we're gonna do this every time, and sometimes knowing that is really helpful and part of what allows people to be present here. So there is a difference, but I think it's mostly a difference of scale. I don't think it's for me, but other people are more nuanced educators than I am, and I'm happy about that because I learned from them, including you, Savannah. But for me, it's not. It's just accounting for the long scale of time and understanding that this is a space that we're co-creating, that we're going to need to make have a depth of presence that can hold us for that long.
I love that. I want to point towards Sage Crump's essay also, that it's like the classroom as a space to create a culture that you can see the incremental changes happen over time. And also, there's something about consent. Like, I think when I was first getting started, I was like, I facilitate rather than teach because I want to be in spaces people choose to be in or consenting to be in.
Yeah.
I think the work of the teacher often is to find the places like, where is consent possible in this condition, right? Like, you know, maybe you all got forced to be here, but now that we're here, how can we consent to making a miraculous experience of this? It's, you know, like what it is. Thank you for answering that. The next question here, how do you persist when or if you encounter imposter syndrome?
Oh, yeah. Dedication is so helpful for that. It's so helpful because I'm not pretending to be Lydia's granddaughter. Like, I'm Lydia's granddaughter, for better or for worse. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what it is. So putting that to the front, I mean, even, you know, when I was writing my dissertation, I was like, that was a huge imposter syndrome, you know, experience for me. And it was like, okay, as opposed to proving to my dissertation committee that I'm smart enough to get this degree.
Yeah.
I'm dedicating my writing to somebody who I love, and I'm not pretending to love them. I'm not going to dedicate it to somebody who I pretend to love. You know, like that won't even, who is that? You know, like that won't even occur to me. So that's it. It's, for me, it works almost immediately.
Yeah.
And
beautiful.
That's why I do it repeatedly, because that does creep back in where I'm like, don't I have to prove that I deserve to even facilitate this? How are they going to trust me if I'm not the smartest person that they've ever met? You know, like all of that stuff. And it's like, no, that's not, they deserve to have the person here who Lydia Gumbs loved from the second she was born, and
right.
like bought a piano for, so the part of her brain that was supposed to be musical could think in these different patterns, and who supported to be able to have all the enrichment and educational experiences. That energy is what is here, not the things that happen, but the love that said, no, you're worthy to be anywhere you want to be.
That's right. I think that's good. And something I think I would add to it is, if you don't come from that like immediate lineage where you're like, oh, I can point to this person who was really like riding for me, you know, then you can point to ancestors who rode for us in general. Like there's been moments of imposter syndrome for me where I'm just like, I'm just going to reach back to Harriet, right? Because what I'm always interested in is, how do I get people to come to the unknown, right? Or to something I'm like, I'm pretty sure freedom is this way. And I'm experiencing increased freedom in my life, you know, so I'm like, I've been there. And so I'm coming back to be like, I've been there, I've experienced more freedom, and I want to, I think that more of us could do this or whatever. And I'm like, that is a modern day, for me, way of being like, oh, it's that Harriet activity, right? It's like, freedom is this way, and I'm trying to get more of us there to recognize. And so I'm like, I think about Harriet, and I'm like, well, you know, she wasn't able to convince everyone to go, and she wasn't able to. She couldn't stay and wait for everyone to catch up. She couldn't argue the point, right? She was like, I'm not gonna have this big. Like, we don't have time for that. Like, if you don't like my dress, or you know how I did my hair today, or whatever the fuck, like, I'm still gonna go get ready. You're welcome to join me. And if not,
and you're welcome.
You're not welcome to destroy this. I think about that, and I'm just like, okay, I'm dedicating this to her. And so it might also be great, at least for a period of time, to find that ancestor who you're like, I'm dedicating this as a practice where I'm gonna just try to channel that energy, right? And I'm dedicating this to this person who loved us enough to take that risk and be vulnerable and endanger themselves. Right? I'm like, this isn't even that dangerous. I'm like, if y'all don't like me, if we have a bad time, like, we'll all be okay. Like, you know, so yeah. So that
absolutely. Yes.
Ashley just wanted us to know how much we are loved and how grateful she is for us. So if she put it in the Q&A box, and I really see the move there, and I love it, Ashley. I really affirm what you did there. We have this question. I was just up in Cape Mendocino near Earthseed Land, and I had such a hard time coming home. Any ideas for facilitating closure for people leaving healing places, incredibly healing places, and reintegrating into the complexities of home?
Yes, I love that question. I think that's something that I often mark as a facilitator. You know, when we're in a particular moment, you know, when we're chanting, you know, my people are free, which Harriet Tubman said. I say the thing that I said a little while ago about embodied memory, you know, and say like, okay, so this what we're feeling. We can come back here anytime.
That's right.
And I do think it is helpful to have actual closure, or to do whatever the last thing is we do. I want to be intentional about closing a space. Often it's with a group poem. Is it just because it's my favorite thing in the world? Or is it because it provides people closure? Time will tell. But there is something about the act of creating something together, and what I love to do is just like a fill in the blank poem that like let's say if we had a 610 with us and we just wanted to have our closing group poem, we could do some comments right now. I love myself enough to blank.
Yeah.
There's this way that's our own affirmation. That is a witnessed affirmation that we can make together. And then I love to then send the people the actual poem, because that also was a portal for us to go back. Like, oh, right. Remember when I was with all these people who love themselves in this way? And I felt like I could say I love myself enough to be honest with my neighbors. I don't know, whatever it was.
Yes.
I think it's great to create those portals. So to acknowledge when they're happening all throughout the experience, but to close with something that is intentionally, we're nowist, right? We're marking this moment. We're speaking in the present tense, not like I'll eventually love myself enough to blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
But like,
right now,
this is what I'm now, I'm a witness, and I know the route back. I mean, speaking of Harriet Tubman again, you know, it's like, these are the stars. Wherever I'm standing, I can orient myself by this. And
that's right.
Thank you for that question, because I do think it's important.
I love that. I love that idea of, I don't know, have you been to a Lizzo concert?
I wish.
Okay, so
that day.
We're gonna go. Let's go together. So
yes,
Lizzo basically facilitates the room through a self-love transformative experience.
Yes.
And before the night closes, she's like, okay, we're beaming all of our love, beam it all up into the space, beam it all up. And then everyone reach up and take what you need and pull it down and put it into your heart. And you'll always be able to remember it. And when it was happening, I was like, oh, this is so amazing. I remember that shit regularly, right?
Exactly.
And so I started bringing it into my facilitation. I'm like, take a snapshot like of this feeling, bring it in, it'll be there. And those moments do stay. Like, I'm like, oh, I intentionally wanted it to stay, and it stayed. Damn. That's amazing. But also there's something about closure, right? Like acknowledging, one of the things we do in the somatic space is we acknowledge, we're like, this is the end of this.
Yes.
This thing is done now. Like, we will not be back together in this formation again.
Right.
And feel what you feel about that. Go ahead and, feel grief, feel the let go, feel the gratitude, like be present for the closure of it. Like, don't deny that it's happening. And I think especially with some of the losses we've had, I'm like, oh, I'm so grateful that there was a moment where I was in a circle with LL and that moment was closed well. And now LL is gone and I feel closure. Which did not happen with so many other people that we've lost. So really naming that. I think let's do one more question. Do you have time for?
Oh, I'm chilling. I just want to say I love this poem that y'all are writing.
I see it. I'm just doing it. I was like, do you want to name some of the things that folks are saying here?
Sure. I love myself enough to listen. I love myself enough to say no. I love myself enough to open, to heal, to show up whole, to dance and play, to sing the universe back to itself, to heal, to rest, to be present, to be loved, to rest again. Heck yeah. To focus on joy, to listen to wise voices that uplift me. I love that.
I love that too. I was like, we have to say it because the chat part I don't think shows up later. So I'm like,
so people have to hear it.
I'm like, there was a poem, just believe in it. No, it's like, it was here. Now you've heard Alexis read this original poem. So this next question is actually, I'm really interested in hearing, and maybe this can do a lot, but would either of you want to share words about interacting with money and labor in these liminal times as people of color?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, that's always a question. In capitalism, how do you relate to money and labor is a huge question of this moment.
Yeah.
And a century of moments and another century of moments. But the labor and time, I mean, I think that when we know that our breathing is sacred, it does a lot. I think that when we study and notice how we breathe in different spaces and different situations, it tells us so much. You know, like there are certain places where it's like, oh, I'm breathing deeper. Certain people I can collaborate with, and I'm like, I notice the quality of my breath, right? And there are certain spaces where it's like, oh, I can hardly breathe in here.
Maybe
Maybe that's not the space for me to, work.
That's right.
Maybe that's not the space for me to, for my livelihood to depend on me being able to go back to that place again and again.
Yeah.
And sometimes we know that and we can act on it immediately. We can just say, like, if you're freelancing like me and somebody invites you and you realize that's not somewhere you want to go, you can just say no. Sometimes it's the place that you work and it's going to be a minute before you can pivot to do something else. But knowing that is really important. So what I would say about that today, that could be, a whole book, really. Maybe it will be, Adrian.
I was like, hold on. Well, actually, too, I think Rebecca Walker is working on a book on money and breathing and labor. And so I'm going to take a peek. Yeah.
Yeah. But I would just say, pay attention to your breathing. One of the things that gives me the most anxiety and makes me need to take a deep breath is money and capitalism and being afraid that I'm not going to have enough money to afford this and do this and have dignity and safety. That's what capitalism does.
Yeah.
And there's so much information in my breathing. Money is supposed to be what I have to figure out in order to survive. What I really have to figure out in order to survive is breathing.
That's right.
And remembering that is important, because the other thing is a lie, but the second thing is the truth. Like, you really do have to breathe.
I love that. And it speaks to community, also that, I think both of us have made the choice to mostly publish our work with like small presses and to kind of stay close to the ground, as it were, in the work, just like, okay, who's doing things and like, how can we be present with that? And community make sure that works, right? Like, I'm just like, there have been many choices to be like, I'm not going to do this work for major white institutions. I'm not going to do this work for big foundations. I'm not going to do this work. Y'all might benefit from it, but I'm really interested in like who's on at the forefront, who's up at the front. And I think there's a moment we're in right now that feels really unique, where capitalism has run rampantly wild inside of our movement spaces. And people are the number of times that I hear people like teaching each other, and it's like, this is so beautiful. And then they're like, now pay me. And it's like, oh, hold up. Like, all of this is all of ours. And the resources that flow back should be flowing into collective containers. Like, when I make resources back for my books, the majority of it goes back into Emergent Strategy Ideation Institute and places where it can then flow back. And I see you do that all the time. Like, resources come in and you're just like, here's another course, here's another program, here's another way for you to access this medicine. And you keep monetizing things in a way that's like perpetual for people. It's like, you will, if you do put a little bit in, it's like a little seed. You're like, if you put a little bit in, this garden will blossom forever for you. Which I think is also so important, is not creating these permanent financial relationships with people in order for them to access something that you channeled from the universe, but creating a way for people to be like, oh, like I always think, I'm like, how do I set the amount or the value of this? I'm like, just enough for you to feel like I'm investing in myself.
Exactly.
Right. Like, I'm like, I want you to always be like, what do I need to put in to make sure that I read, like, I'm like that. Like, if I buy the hard copy, the hardback, then I'm like, I will read that, because that just cost me $35. And I invested in myself to learn about this or whatever. Yeah. And maybe that's still the next level of capitalism I need to be unlearning as well. But, in my dream world, we are post-capitalist. It is part of our history, and we are in that evidence world, and we are figuring out how to be in relationships where we actually get to value breath and dirt and time together, and like, all the things that actually matter. And then in that, the wisdom is flowing through us. Right. So I'm like, if I could put the books up, just print them and put them up for free everywhere, and also survive, that's how I would be great. Right. But I do think we're in an interesting moment where every time you get a chance to bring up capitalism and question people about it and think about different economies, like be in that conversation. Like, I think that's the biggest thing we need to be doing around money right now, is not beefing with each other about how much scraps do you have, how much scraps do you have, and how do I take your scraps, but being like, we need a whole different economy. We need a cooperative economy. We need a just green economy. We need these things. Like, how do we talk about that? Yeah. Yes. Okay. I'm going to stop going off because this is supposed to be your questions. I don't like that. All right. Ooh, here's a good one. Why did you choose not to go into the academy?
Oh, everybody always asks me that, which is interesting because I'm like, well, why would someone choose to go into the academy? Is
Message.
a different, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because people are always like, why did you choose to not do? And
how dare you not be in there? No, but I do.
No,
I love
I
it
know
though, because it really is. I also think that again, this is that precipice lifestyle thing where it's like, for people who are like, if I want to write books and I want to share information and stuff like that, the academy is the place where that can happen, which is, you know, what the academy I think really wants you to believe. So I do think, like, why?
I think it does come from a sense of inevitability that other people feel, right? And so people, the amount of people that ask me that is just evidence to how inevitable it feels, and people feel that they don't have choices. So that what is terrifying about that means that there are a lot of people who are in the academy who don't feel like they fully chose that. Like they're not consensually there because they felt like there was no choice, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, and Maria Fernanda's like, what does it mean to not be in the academy? Like, what are we even talking about? So, I think the question is coming from a place of the fact that I have a PhD and I wrote a dissertation and I spent time in the university getting an advanced graduate degree. Usually what people are doing with that degree is they're teaching in universities, or not, that's not actually what everybody's doing, but it's made to seem like what people do with that is they teach at a university, not necessarily the same one where they got their degree, and kind of reproduce that institution. And so I'm not doing that. What I'm doing with the time I took to learn what I learned and really immerse myself in Black feminist archival traces is trying to build a whole nother world with that, and is creating and co-creating the Living Library of Mobile Homecoming Trust, which asks, how do we live based on these insights of Black feminists that I've had the opportunity to think about and be supported to think about for years. And so the reason I chose differently, it's not to say that I then got the PhD and said, oh, now I don't want to teach in the university. That was never the reason that I was studying this. And so my labor, I wanted to go into creating the institutions that we need. And not into reproducing institutions that I've seen cause so much harm and make colonialism possible, and all of these things that everybody who has a critique of the academy has that critique. Some people are using their labor.
Wait. Oh,
trying to call me.
There you go. I don't know why these people trying to call us. Don't they know we're on live? Doesn't everybody live on Instagram all the time?
I know. Tune into the thing. Anyway, I think that it is, people are writing about this in the chat, but one of the things is that, exactly as you said, Adrienne, that people sometimes are like, this is how I'm going to have the space to write and think, is if I work for a university, and the university works hard to make invisible and not reward, but still require the fact that the majority of labor that people end up doing is reproducing the institution itself, and not necessarily the radical space for thought that they want to have. Some people definitely do both. But to keep working there, you got to do that reproduction part. So, and I'm not here for it. And, you know, that could just be because I'm an anarchist. It could just be that I'm Jeremiah's granddaughter who said I work too hard to work for somebody else. And different people have their different choices, and I have love and compassion for all of it. But part of the purpose of me visibly doing something different is also to let people know, you know, that the knowledge that you gain, wherever you gain it, you can use it for anything. So if you came up in a nonprofit industrial complex,
Yeah.
the knowledge that you gained through all that work through nonprofit organizations, you can use it for anything. You don't have to use it to make another nonprofit or to work at another nonprofit. You know, it's
That's right.
the same thing with any form of institution. The academy is not different than any other institutional complex at all. It's just an institutional complex that exists in capitalism and has existed for a long time, and
Yeah.
rampant with colonialism.
I love that. And because I also love that it's like almost all of us are in relationship to some of these institutions somewhere, right? Whether it's the nonprofit institutions, academic institutions, if you're traditional educational system, you know, like almost all of us are in some relationship to them. And inside of it, it's like, this one needs to be torn down. This one needs to be transformed. And I'm like, do that if that's what's interesting to you. And also remember that, because I think people are like, oh, I'm going to jump from this. I see people jump around from institution to, you know, they're like, I'm leaving the nonprofits and then I become a professor or something. Like, you know, I'm like, it's capitalism. Like it's everywhere.
Like, why am I
publishing industry is actually not that different either. You know, like, you know, in almost all of these places, like you do a massive amount of work, your resources mostly support whatever the institution is, and you're trying to eke out a living on the edge of that. And all of that needs to shift. All of that needs to shift into structures and systems in which you put out labor, you receive enough. That's the goal, right? Whatever enough looks like for you, you receive enough, and that you aren't in a constant like going for each other's jugulars to try to get your enough, but that you actually are like, oh, I made something. Like, I think this is one of the reasons why both of us are like habitual citers of anybody's work, because we're just like, it doesn't take anything away from our work to cite other people's work. And that a lot of people who are in the academy often tell me that they're like, oh my, you know, like you cite stuff. And I'm like, yeah, like, why wouldn't you, you know, why wouldn't you? But then I'm like, oh, because if you're in a competitive environment, you have to pretend as if yourself. You have to pretend you made it up yourself, or you have to try to get there first or something. I'm like, but in the church, if there's nothing new under the sun, but there are new suns, then there are other ways of approaching this. And that is a quote from Octavia E. Butler, the God for the Parable of the Preacher. So I think that we are in a good place. Like, we might be able to wrap it here. And I say that listening to my body, because my body's like, it's time for eating now.
Yes.
So like, I breathed into it sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, a bitch is hungry. I affirm that. Thank you. I want to eat with you soon. So this is one of I'll call you after this, but I think you're so great. And I'm so grateful that you exist. And I'm so grateful that you say yes. And I'm so grateful that you channel. And I am so grateful that you particularly channeled this work. I think that there's several pieces in the book that I think if people just sat with that one for a period of time, it would change their lives and their practices. And I really think this is one of those where I'm like, invite yourself back and back and back into the breath. And like, I think you will continuously let yourself be transformed. I wonder if there was anything that you wanted to say or do or practice or whatever before we depart today.
Yeah, I want to say, I saw my dear friend and teacher Zelda Lockhart in here dropping gems in the chat.
Oh, yay.
The house. When we were talking about institutions, she wrote, the house is the house. I was like, that's right. And
the house is always the house.
I love you, Zelda. And Zelda is the person who supported me to really create the practice where I write every single day. And everything
Thank you, Zelda.
So thank you, Zelda. And Shango Dare is here, who just makes it possible for me to just be happy every day, which is also where everything flows from. Yes. And my mom logged in from totally different time zones where it's nighttime in London. And so I just feel appreciation for, I feel very loved. And it's appropriate because this is what you do, Adrienne. You just create so much space for love to come through and joy, and for us to really access that part of us that is already free, you know, that really already has everything that we need. You do that again and again. You've been doing that since I met you when I was 18 years old. And I'm so grateful that I get to witness that for decades in this lifetime. And I intend to intentionally witness
wagging.
for my entire life. I just love you so much. I'm so glad that you live close to me now. And
me too.
Yeah, we're gonna go have some wonderful food very soon. And thank you everyone else for coming.
Yeah, thank you for coming. I hope you all get something delicious. I will be posting this live in a non-live way forever on the Holding Change, the Instagram TV thing. And then tomorrow I'll be back with Makani Thimba, who's going to talk to us about facilitation and strategy. So we'll see you all then. All right.
Mwah.
Bye, beloveds.
Bye.